In this lesson, we will study about the while loop. Just like the for loop which we studied earlier, while loop is also used to repeat a block of statements multiple times. So the first thing you might be thinking is that why do we need to have another loop which is while loop when we have for loop available? Most of the things which we do using the for loop can be done using the while loop as well, and vice versa is also true. But there are certainly cases where we prefer to use one type of loop on the other. So in this lesson, first we will see the basic working and the syntax of the while loop. Then we will also see the cases where we prefer to use while loop over the for loop. And finally, we will discuss about a couple of tasks which can be programmed using the while loop. I will start by writing a simple for loop, and then we will do the same thing using the while loop. I am printing a simple message using the for loop. It will get printed 10 times. Now first I will tell you about the syntax of the while loop. We write a while loop by using the keyword while, and then inside the parentheses we have some condition and then a colon sign. Then starts the block of the while loop. There can be one or more statements inside the block of the while loop. So when interpreter executes this statement, it will basically check if the condition is true or not. If the condition is true, the interpreter will execute the block of the while loop. When it will execute the last statement of the block, it will loop back to the while statement. Again, it will check the condition. If the condition is true, it will execute the block one more time and then will loop back to the while statement. It will check the condition again, and this process will continue until the condition of the while statement is false. This also means that inside this block of the while loop, we must have some logic which will eventually make the condition false. If that is not so, this process will continue forever. Let's see that in actual coding to better understand this. We'll do the same task of printing computer programming 10 times. So I'm declaring a variable, for example a equal to 1, and now I'm writing a while statement and the condition is a is less than equal to 10. We know that when a is 1, this condition is true. So I'm printing the message. But as I said earlier, that there must be some mechanism which should make the condition false after the required number of iterations. I want the block of this loop be executed 10 times. Value of a is 1, which is set on line number 11, and the condition is a is less than equal to 10. So I can have another statement over here to increment the value of a by 1 in each iteration. So what will happen now, in first iteration after the line number 13, when line number 14 will get executed, a will get the value 2. Interpreter will loop back to line number 12, but now a is 2. The condition is still true, and second time the block will get executed, which is the second iteration. Line number 13 will print the message again, and then on line number 14, the value of a will get incremented, and the new value will be 2. So interpreter will loop back to line number 12, and a having the value 2, the condition a less than equal to 10 is again true. This process will continue, and you can see that a is getting incremented in each iteration of the loop. And on the 10th iteration of the loop, a will get the value 11. And now when interpreter will loop back to line number 12, the condition a is less than equal to 10 will be false. And that completes the iterations of this while loop. Let's run the code. And you can see the message is displayed 10 times. We can see the step-by-step execution of this code. I will also add the number when the message is displayed. It is the variable a which is getting the different value in each iteration, so I can do it like that. Now this statement is outside the while loop. I'll change the condition as a is less than equal to 5 just to have lesser iterations. And now let's run the code in debugging mode. Interpreter is on line number 1, a gets the value 1. Now interpreter is on line number 2, which is a while loop statement, and the condition a is less than equal to 5 is true. So it will enter into the block. Now it is on line number 4. Line number 4 increments the value of a by 1, so a will get updated to 2. And interpreter loops back to line number 2. Now a is 2 and the condition a is less than equal to 5 is again true, so it will enter into the block, the value of a will get updated and it will be 3 this time. It will loop back to the line number 2 and this will continue. Now interpreter is on line number 4 and the current value of a is 5. So a will get incremented and it will become 6. Interpreter will loop back to line number 2 and now a less than equal to 5 is false. So this time interpreter will not enter into the block and it should jump to line number 5. So that's the working sequence of a while loop. If you see the syntax of this while loop, it is quite similar to the if statement. In if statement, we have a condition after the if statement and then there is a block of the if statement. The difference is that in case of an if statement, when the condition is true, the block of the if statement will get executed, but after that, the interpreter will execute the line just after the block of if statement. And in case of a while statement, the interpreter loops back to the while statement. This statement is really important in the execution of the iterations of the while loop. If I don't have this statement, what it means is that the condition will never get false. So this while loop iterations will never end. Let's see that over here. I'm running the code and you can see the same message is being displayed continuously and continuously. This is known as infinite while loop because it has infinite iterations. While working with while loops, sooner or later you will encounter this situation. I will press Ctrl+C to interrupt this process. Now let's do a little practice of the while loop. Let's do the task of finding the factorial of a number. We did this earlier using the for loop and now we will do it using the while loop. I'm taking a number from the user and we know to find the factorial of a number, we have to find the product of all numbers starting from 1 till the number. So for that I am declaring a product variable, for example f equal to 1, which will hold that product. Now if I have to write a while loop, inside that while loop I must have numbers starting from 1 till the entered integer n. For that I will use a variable, for example I, and I will set its value equal to 1. Now I will write a while loop. Inside the while loop I will increment this variable I by 1 in each iteration, so I can have a condition that I is less than equal to n, because I have to increment I to the value of n and I have to multiply that I with f to get the product. And here I am incrementing the value of I. The starting value of I is 1 and then inside the while loop I am incrementing the value of I by 1. The condition of the while loop is that I is less than equal to n. So the iterations of the while loop will continue until I gets the value which is greater than n. And in each iteration I am multiplying that value of I with f to get the final product, which is the factorial of the number n. So now I am outside the while loop and I can simply display the factorial of the number. Factorial of 4 is 24. I will strongly recommend to execute this program in step-by-step mode and you will understand the whole sequence in a better way. Now we will gradually move to the discussion that why we need to have a while loop when we have a for loop. I will illustrate this idea by one task which we did earlier. In that task, we took the marks of 5 subjects from the user and we displayed the average of those marks. For that we used a for loop to take 5 values from the user. So let's do that here. I am taking the marks in variable m . I should have a sum variable because I have to add all those marks to find the average, and then outside the loop I can find and display the average marks. The average will be the sum divided by 5. Now what if the total subjects are 10 instead of 5? Yes, we can simply change the range function value to 10 instead of 5 and that will take 10 subjects marks from the user. But think for a moment that we as a programmer don't know how many subjects user wants to enter. Maybe he wants to enter 5 subjects or maybe less or more. So one solution can be that we first ask the user to enter the total number of subjects he wants to enter and then use that number for the iterations of the for loop. So let's do that over here. I'm taking that input in the variable total. And now in the range function, I will use this variable total instead of 5 or 10. So whatever user will enter, this for loop will get executed that many times. On the average calculations, now I should use s divided by total. Let's check that. I want to enter 4 subjects marks, so this program will ask for the 4 subjects marks and will display the average. So this is a good solution that now it is on the user to select the number of subjects he wants to enter. But still a much better solution will be that we allow the user to enter as many subjects as he wants without even first asking him about that number. What I mean is that user will keep on entering the values of the subjects marks until he is done. and then we should display the average of all those entered marks, whether they were 5 values or the 50 values or whatever. But in that case, how would program know that user has finished entering the marks? So we can have a working of this program, as the program will keep asking the user to enter the marks of the subjects, and when the user is done, he should indicate that by entering something special. For example, we can say that he should enter -1 to indicate that he is done with entering the marks. So before entering that -1, all the values that user has entered are the ones to be considered for the calculation of average marks. So let's do that over here. I'm taking marks of the subjects from the user. I should have a sum variable, and I have to update that sum variable. Now these are the two statements which I have to execute repeatedly. So I will make them as a block of the while loop. Now what should be the condition inside the while loop? As we said that the -1 entered by the user would indicate that it's not the marks of any subject, but he has finished entering the marks. We are taking that input in variable m, so the condition should be that m is not equal to -1. So these two lines will keep executing until the condition is false, which would happen when user will enter -1. But pay attention and see that when this program will execute, the first line is line number 1 which will get executed, s will get the value 0, and then on line number 2, we have condition as m is not equal to -1, but we don't have m defined yet. So this is going to generate an error. So what I should do is that I will define m and I should set its value to anything which should make the condition of the while loop true. So it can be any value other than -1. So now the condition of the while loop is true and the first iteration will start, but the next iterations are dependent on the value of m, which is on line number 4, and that value is entered by the user. We should indicate in the message that you have to enter -1 to exit the process. Let's first see the execution of this while loop and then we will do the rest of the calculation. You can see it is asking for the marks. I'm entering the marks. It will keep on asking the marks. And now if I am entering a -1, the condition of the while loop would be false this time and the loop iterations must stop. You can see that over here. Now let's do the calculations for the average of the entered values. To find the average, we must know how many are the entered values, and those are the number of times the loop iterations are executed. To get that number, I can declare a variable as count equal to 0, and then inside the while loop block, I can increment this variable by 1. So in each iteration of the while loop, the count variable will get incremented. I can also use that count variable to display the number with the subject, for example subject 1, subject 2 and so on. Now outside the loop, let's first print the value of the sum variable and the count variable. I'm entering the first subject's marks as 80, the second subject's marks are also 80, and now I want to end the process. So I should enter -1. You can see the sum is 159 and the count is 3. The last entered -1 was not actually the marks of any subject, but that was just to end the process. But of course the logic that we have written has added that -1 into the sum, so the total sum is 159 instead of 160, and that has also incremented the count variable, so the actual subjects are 2, but the last one is also considered as one subject. So first we have to correct this logic. These are the two calculations which we are doing for the each iteration, to update the sum variable and to update the count variable, but we do not need this for the last iteration when the user is entering -1. So I can simply apply a condition on these two statements that they should get executed only when the entered value is not -1. And this should resolve the issue. There can be a second solution that instead of applying this if statement over here, I will change that back to the original form. Now outside the for loop, I know that the sum value is not correct. The last -1 is also added into that sum. So what I can simply do is that outside the while loop, I can increment the value of sum by 1 so that that -1 added into sum is balanced out. And similarly, that count is not a correct count and I can balance that by subtracting 1 from that value. And now I can find and display the average mark. Instead of total, I will use count. Let's enter all values as 80 so that the average should be 80. And now on the 5th iteration, I'm entering -1 and you can see the average is correct. So you see, this approach is quite better as compared to the for loop where we first have to ask the user to enter the number of subjects. Now can you figure out the cases where we should prefer to use while loop over the for loop? Those are the cases when we don't know how many iterations are needed for that process. For example, in this case, we don't know how many times user will be entering the marks. So as a general practice, when we know the number of iterations of a process, maybe that is a direct value or by some variable or by some calculations, we can use the for loop. But when we don't know how many iterations are needed for the process, we will be using the while loop. Let me give you one other example. For any program where we take some values from the user, do some calculations and then display the final result, let's take the example of a quadratic equation. We will be taking the values a, b and c from the user and then the program will be displaying the roots of that quadratic equation. But if user has to find the solution of another quadratic equation, he will have to run the program again. It would be better if after displaying the result to the user, our program should ask him if the user wants to find another solution or not. And if user enters y for the yes, the program should run once again. And again at the end, it should ask the user if he wants another solution or not. If he presses y again, the program must run again. So how many times user will be pressing y? We don't know. And in such case, we should use a while loop. Let's implement this whole scenario. I have this program of finding the quadratic equation solution. This is a simple display message. Then we are taking the value of a, b and c from the user. We are finding the discriminant. And then if the discriminant is positive, the roots will be real. We are doing that calculation over here. And else means the discriminant is negative and the roots will be complex. Those are calculated over here. And finally the two roots are displayed. So if I have to run the whole logic multiple times, these are the lines which I want to execute again. I'm not including line number 2 because I just want to display that message one time only. So if I have to repeat it 10 times, I can make these statements as a block of the for loop having the 10 iterations. But literally, I don't know how many equations user wants to solve. So I should not fix it to 10 or something. Rather, I should use a while loop and user can solve as many equations as he wants. So at the end, I can ask the user if he is interested to run the program again. Option is just a variable name. I'm taking a string input from the user, asking him to press Y if he wants to rerun the code. So now these are the statements which I want to execute again. So I will make them as the block of the while loop. What should be the condition in the while loop? We have taken the option from the user in variable option, so the condition should be that the option variable is equal to y. We can incorporate both lower and the uppercase y. So if user enters anything other than y, this condition would be false. But again we will have a problem that when we will run this code after line number 2, when interpreter will reach on line number 4, there is no option variable defined yet. So we should define the option variable before that line and we should set its value so that the condition of the while loop is true. This will ensure the first iteration of the while loop, but the next iterations will be dependent on the value entered by the user. So let's run this code. There is a syntax error because I forgot to put the colon at the end of the condition of the while loop. Let's enter some values of coefficients a, b and c. The program displayed the result and then it's asking to press Y if you want to rerun the code. Now if I will press Y, there will be the next iteration of the while loop and the block of the while loop starting from line number 5 will get executed. Again we have the result and the program is asking to press Y if you want to rerun. I am pressing Y again and now is the next iteration of the while loop. I have result again and this time if I don't want another solution, I can press any key other than Y. For example, I am pressing N and you can see now the program has ended. So this is one specific case where we should use the while loop for the multiple executions of the program based on the user choice. Now let's discuss another such case. For that we will consider the same program again. We know that for the quadratic equation, the coefficient a cannot be 0 because we have to divide by 2a to find the roots of the equation, and if a is 0, that division by 0 will generate an error. You can see that over here. So this is line number 5 where we are taking the value of the variable a. So the solution can be validating if the value of a is 0 or not. So I can write an if statement over here that if a entered by the user is 0, I can display an appropriate message. And I should also ask him to re-enter the value of a. But the question is, are you sure that he will enter the correct value on this line number 8 now? Maybe the second time again he will enter the value of a as 0. So instead of if statement on line number 6, if I make it a while statement, now see this while loop carefully. First see line number 5. If user will enter the value of a as something non-zero, this condition of while loop on line number 6 is false and there will be no iteration of this while loop. And that's what we want, because if a is correct, we want to execute line number 9. But if a is 0, there will be the first iteration of this while loop, and on line number 8, if user will again enter the value of a as 0, there will be the second iteration of this while loop. And in second iteration on line number 8, if user enters the value of a as 0 again, there will be the next iteration. And this will continue until user enters some non-zero value of a. Now this is a perfect use of a while loop. We have no idea how many times user will be entering 0 as a value of a. So let's run this code. I have entered the value of a as 0, so it's asking me to enter the value again. Again I have entered 0 and it will keep asking me. And now if I enter some non-zero value, that highlighted while loop iteration would end over there and interpreter will move to line number 9 and it will take the value of b from the user. So I hope this makes a good sense to when and how to use a while loop. Now it's asking me to press Y if I want to rerun the code. It is basically the last line of the outer while loop. Now let's discuss a task. You have to write a program that will take a positive integer from the user, assuming that it will be a positive integer, and then you have to display the following sequence. If the number is even, halve it, and if the number is odd, you have to multiply it by 3 and add 1. Now in any case, whatever answer you get, you have to repeat that process on that answer. So your program should keep on generating new numbers with this process until you get a value 1. You have to print all values and the number of steps until you get the 1. Let's see one example. For example, the number entered by the user is 6. It is an even number, so the half of it would be 3. So the next number generated by your program should be 3. So now this 3 is an odd number, so it will be multiplied by 3, which will be 9, and plus 1 will make it 10. Now this 10 is an even number and half of it would be 5. Now 5 is an odd number, so 5 times 3 plus 1 is 16. It is an even number, the half is 8, and again it is an even number, the half is 4, again an even number, and the half is 2, and then again it is an even number, and the half will be 1. And now we got 1, so this process would stop over here. Remember, user has entered only 6. All other numbers are generated by the program, and it took 8 steps to reach to the value of 1. Now let's see another example. Suppose user enters 9. Now it is an odd number, so 9 times 3 plus 1 will be 28. The 28 is even number, so we will divide it by 2. It will be 14, and we will continue this process. And eventually we will get the value 1. This time it took 19 steps to reach till the value of 1. So how can we code this program? These are the two statements for the process. We have to repeat multiple times until we get the value 1. So after how many times we will get the value 1? You can see from the two examples that the steps are not fixed and it is difficult to find how many steps would be required to reach till 1. So this is a case where we should prefer to use a while loop. Let's do that here. I'm taking the value from the user in variable n. Now if n is even, I will divide it by 2. And I'm storing the value in the same variable n. And else means n is odd, so I will multiply it with 3 and add 1. Now I have to repeat this process until n becomes 1. So I should make it the block of a while loop. And the condition should be that n is not equal to 1. So if n is not equal to 1, this process will continue. After getting the updated value of the n, I have to display that. I'm still inside the while loop because I have to print the each value of the iteration. Let's run this code. I'm entering 9, which was the example 2, and you can see these are all those numbers which we saw in the example. They are displayed as floating value, so I can convert those to an integer. Moreover, I have to display the number of steps, which are total numbers being generated until we get the value 1. For that, I can have a count variable. Before the while loop, I'm naming it as steps and the value is 0. Inside the while loop, I can increment the value of the steps variable. And then finally, outside the while loop, I can display the number of steps. You can see it took 19 steps. So we did the task, but I want to show one more thing over here, which is not exactly related to the while loop. See that on line number 5 we are checking if the n is even or not, and then on line number 7 we have used an else statement, which means that n would be an odd number. But instead of an else over there, I can also use another if statement that n remainder divided by 2 is equal to 1, which is a condition of an odd number. There should not be any problem over here, so let's run the code again. Let's enter 9 again. And we have a very strange display. The value 4 and 2 are continuously being generated and the process is not ending. I will press Ctrl+C to end the process, and let's see where is the problem. When we have used another if statement over here instead of the else, the two if statements on line number 5 and line number 7 are independent, meaning that second will get evaluated even if the first was true. The problem is that we are updating the same variable which is inside the condition of line number 7. So when n became 2, the condition of line number 5 is true and line number 6 will make that n equal to 1. And then line number 7 will get executed, which is another if statement, and when n is 1, the condition of line number 7 is true and that 1 will become 4 on line number 8. So you see n will never get a value 1 at the end of the iteration of the while loop. So I will change that back to the else statement, and now when n is 2 on line number 5, the condition is true, but that means the else block will not get executed. So line number 6 will get executed, n will become 1, and the next statement would be line number 9. It will display the value 1 and it will loop back to line number 3 where the condition would be false and interpreter will come out of the while loop. Now we will discuss 3 more problems. The first is finding the next prime number. You have to create a user-defined function which will have one input argument as a positive integer, and the function will return the first prime number which comes after the input number. The important thing is that the input number is not supposed to be a prime number. For example, if the input number is 25, which is not a prime number, after 29 the first prime number is 29. 26 is not a prime number, 27 is not a prime number, and so as 28. So the next prime number after 25 is 29. And if the input is 28, again the next prime number would be 29. I will explain the logic of this program by a pseudocode so that you can easily implement that. For those who don't know what a pseudocode is, it is a way to express the logic of your program in somewhat similar to programming style. Not exactly following the correct syntax, but just a way to explain your logic. So what you can do is, because you have to deal with the prime numbers, so you can create a function with the name isPrime. It would have one input, for example n, and the output would be true if the n is prime number, and the output will be false if the n is a composite number or not a prime number. By the way, we have created this function previously. Now for the next logic, I have explained the logic of the main program, but you can easily convert that into a user-defined function. So you will be taking an input from the user, for example in variable num, and now you have to search for the next prime number. Of course, the first possibility would be the next number, which would be num plus 1. So you can say x equal to num plus 1. So if x is a prime number, you got the answer. But if it is not a prime number, you will go to the next number. And if that is also not a prime number, you will go to the next number. So how many times you have to go to the next number to find the prime number? We don't know that. If entered number is 10, the next number which is 11 is the prime number. But if entered number is 19, the next number 20 is not a prime number. Even the next number 21 is not a prime number. Not even the 22. And then we have 23 as the prime number. So we don't know how many times we have to repeat the process. So this is the case where we should use the while loop. So this would be the logic of the while loop. If x is not a prime number, you will simply increment the value of x. you will have to use isPrime function over there in the condition. So when x will be a prime number, the while loop iteration would stop over there, and then outside the while loop, you can display the value of x. Now the next task is finding the first n prime numbers. So in this program, you will take one positive integer from the user, and then you have to print that number of prime numbers starting from 2. In last lesson, we did a task to display the prime numbers till the entered number, but see carefully, this is a different task. For example, if user enters 6 as the input, it does not mean that you have to display the prime numbers till 6. It actually means is that you have to display first 6 prime numbers, and of course they are starting from 2. So this should be the output of this program. So let's see the pseudocode of this problem. Again, you should have isPrime function to determine if a number is prime or not. Then in the main program, you will take the value from the user in variable, for example num. Many times it is better to consider an example case to build the logic. So suppose here that user is entering the value 6 as num, and to display these first 6 prime numbers, I should have one variable to count those. And we need another variable which should have the starting value as 2, which is the first prime number. Next numbers will be generated in this variable, and if that is a prime number, we will simply display that. So the condition of the while loop will be that the count variable is less than or equal to the value entered by the user. Inside the while loop, we should check if x is a prime number, then we will display that, and we should increment the count variable. And finally, we have to increment the value of the x variable to get the next value, and see carefully that it shouldn't be the part of the if block, because we have to generate next number whether x was prime or not. Spend some time on understanding this logic and you can easily solve this. And now I will present the review question. As a review question, you have to solve a necklace problem. In this problem, we begin with the two single digit numbers which will be entered by the user, of course, and then we have to generate the next numbers in the sequence by adding the previous two numbers and taking just the unit digit of the sum. You have to keep generating the next numbers until the necklace is closed, which is a condition when we get back the starting two numbers. Let's see the example here. Suppose the two numbers entered by the user are 1 and 8. So to generate the next number of the sequence, we will add those and it will be 9, which is the next number. Now we will add 9 and 8, which is 17, but we have to just take the unit digit, and that is 7. Now we have to add 9 and 7. The result is 16 and the unit digit is 6. And we will continue this process. Now see that we got 1 and 8, which are the numbers from where we started this process. We have to stop this process over here, and the total numbers generated in the sequence are known as the necklace length. So you have to display the sequence and you have to display the length of the necklace at the end. I would suggest you to first solve the two questions which are related to the prime numbers so you get a good hold of a while loop, and then do this review question. That's all from this lesson. Thanks for watching.